Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Duncan Chapple. People are going to be joining slowly, so what I'm going to do while that happens is I'm going to scroll through my slides, get to the beginning, go into the presentation, and then hopefully by the time I've done that, then we will be in a position to start with a few people here. So I'm just going to wait for like 30 seconds, have a sip of my water, move on to the coffee, and then start in about 30 seconds.
Call on the water.
Water and coffee, you see, I'm balancing. Good. Okay, I'm going to clap my hands so the person who edits this for the podcast knows where to start. Good. So, welcome so much. I'm gonna, oh crikey, some people are in the lobby, so I'm gonna have to keep my eye on the lobby. Good. Okay. So I'm Duncan Chapple. Welcome to today's webinar. We're talking about generating leads with analyst content, and particularly using personalization and cold email to do that. I'm going to introduce Shawn Newman, who is the speaker joining me today, run through our agenda, keep an eye on the waiting room in case I can admit people who arrive a little bit later, and then I'll be able to hand over to Shawn, and he will be picking up the bulk of the initial presentation. For those of you who've not met us or don't know much about us, let me just introduce myself and Shawn. So I'm both of us are people with a long background working in and around the analyst industry. Have both worked from analyst firms, both qualified with the Institute for Industry Analyst Relations as analyst relations practitioners, and are pretty seasoned practitioners with something to offer on this topic. I've got two gigs at the moment. I'm working with SageCircle as an analyst relations consultant. So here I'm particularly helping with the Sage Analysts study. This used to be the Analyst Attitude Survey, which is a survey that asks analysts how they feel about tech brands. And then also working on a program of workshops which are inexpensive and allow organizations to personalize and rapidly accelerate what they are doing. I'm going to say more about that later on. My other gig is working as an industrial software specialist. This is actually my background as an industry analyst, following enterprise resource planning, particularly the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning to power this. So I'm working for Elisa, which is probably better known as a large telecommunications carrier in Finland and Estonia, but actually has acquired a wide range of manufacturing, AI and optimization businesses over the last few years, and I'm helping those to reach out to industry analysts. I can hear some noise in the background. Shawn, this is, I don't know if this
that might be
if you can mute
barking
when you're not speaking.
Yeah, sure.
And then I'm going to keep an eye on other participants and make sure it's no one else who's doing that. And then, Shawn, if you want to introduce yourself, I'll mute while you do that.
Sure. Thanks for joining, everybody. As Duncan said, my name is Shawn Newman. I'm excited to be here talking with you about this topic today. I'm coming off a sabbatical for some family commitments, but prior to that, I was the IDC product manager for the emerging vendor solutions product set, which is everything from zero revenue, pre-revenue companies up through $1 billion in revenue. But my primary focus was on the sub $25 million segment and helping companies work with IDC in that product mix and helping our sales team understand what's valuable to technology vendors. Prior to that, I worked for about 10 years at 451 Research as a the global product specialist, leading the team there, helping clients maximize value from working with from 451. Also was a director of data enablement, so have a particular affinity for data and helping people leverage that for maximum value. And started at 451 in enterprise sales, so working with Fortune 500 companies, selling against Gartner, Forrester, IDC, helping CTOs, CIOs understand innovation in technology.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Shawn. What I'm going to do is give a little bit of context to why we're doing this webinar, what we are about. After that, I'm going to hand over to Shawn to step through the bulk of the presentation. And then I'm hoping that during the conversation, participants will use the Q&A at the top of the screen. So you've probably been in webinars before. Hopefully you've been in Microsoft Teams webinars before, but you'll find a Q&A panel where you can submit questions. I'm going to keep an eye on them while Shawn is speaking. I'm probably going to wait until after Shawn has finished speaking, but if there's something that requires the kind of immediate input from him, I don't know, maybe for some background noise he doesn't know about or something like that, then I'll let folk know. And then depending on how the conversation goes, I've got a second set of content where I drill down into a little bit more depth on some of the content that that Shawn has spoken about, and especially talk a little bit about how we can operationalize the guidance that we're giving in this webinar. Just to start off, I mean, I think it would be useful to credit and give thanks to various people that we've had conversations with over the half year or so that this webinar has been in the pipeline. People who know Sage Circle will know that it's been working very extensively on sales enablement since 2008, 2009. It's got a 4-part training and organizational development program about sales enablement, and a large part of that focuses on how to get the best value out of Analyst Content. But as we explain later on in the webinar, there are some bottlenecks that mean that not everybody gets through to that stage. Well, I think what this conversation is really addressing is for people who maybe don't have an extensive sales AR partnership, what can be done with Analyst Content to accelerate that. The seeds of the conversation actually come from one of my colleagues at the Analyst Observatory, this project at the University of Edinburgh, which is over this way. I'm in Edinburgh at the moment, and so the university is there. And my colleague Anna and I were doing some research last year where we were drawing together some insights on sales enablement from interviews with industry analysts that we had we'd conducted and analysed, and we started to pull that together into a paper. Since then, a number of things have happened that kind of have crystallized this and really shown through best practice and speaking to organizations that have got limitations about why it's not working. And so I just want to kind of give a little nod to the various people who've been involved in this process, especially Carter Lusher, the acquisition of TechTarget by Informa Group really opened up a whole series of strategy conversations in analyst firms about how far do they want to be explicitly putting sales enablement, pipeline, education at the middle of their business model. And that's something that many practitioners have been speaking about, including the Sage talk that I did last week with Pat Pulpitz on the topic. But to just kind of frame the midpoint, I suppose, of those discussions, it's really this idea that when we think of the intersection between AR and sales, very often that's an empty space. Yeah, very often it's something like a null set. And where you do see organizations leveraging Analyst Content, often there's a little bit of a disconnection between the way that company is maintaining its relationship on a week-to-week, month-to-month relationship with those analyst firms, and then how they are using content for sales enablement and lead generation. Sometimes firms are using completely different companies for these two different things. And often that means that there's a crucial link missing. And because of that, feedback from marketing and sales back into analyst relations is not working. And I think that the other thing that that reinforces that gap is the fact that often in conversations about sales enablement, what analyst relations people really speak about is licensing analyst content and just hoping that that content kind of organically spreads once you've licensed it. AR, understandably, is rarely involved in operationalizing these strategies, but I must say when it is, it generates incredible results. So this intersection is often empty, and that's a huge problem because the benefits that can be opened up by organizations are huge. So with that context on like why we're having this conversation, I'm going to hand over to Shawn now, really to pick up on the whole question of lead generation from a more strategic kind of angle. There's definitely a lot of tactical advice as we go on. You'll see Shawn has got fantastic templates and so on, which open up a lot of learning opportunity for participants on the call. Before we move on, I should also say this is being recorded. I'm going to put it on my YouTube channel tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. That also magically turns it into a podcast. So if you prefer to listen, then you'll be able to find it there. The podcast and the YouTube channel both got my name. Shawn, let me hand over to you. There's a lot to be said, and I know your starting point is that there's no silver bullet.
Thanks, Duncan. Yeah, I'm using your obligatory AI-generated image here. For folks in the US, you may be familiar if you're not in the US. Coors Light is a beer, and it's also known as a silver bullet. The idea here, right, is that this is my perspective on the market and how to maximize value. And I'm looking forward to questions and comments at the end on your experiences. There's a lot of science that goes into email and personalization and outreach and sales and marketing, but there's a lot of art to it as well. So I'm really excited about that. And, even within the concept itself, to be successful, I think you're going to need to iterate on these concepts and understand what works for you within your organization, and even just going down to individual subject lines or content. It's a constant process of evolution. So just wanted to start out with those types of expectations. So just to get started, we'll start at a higher level and kind of work our way down, right? I think one of the most important things as AR folks that you can do is define your role within the organization by creating a revenue-centric mission statement, because when we talk about leads and content, it really is just about generating revenue within the organization. And I've always found that when you can point to metrics and revenue generation as your primary responsibility, it makes you a key cog within the organization and just raises your visibility. So, here's one that I just put together, use analyst research data and opinion to accelerate lead generation, which is what we'll talk about today. Win revenue, ultimately those leads should turn into opportunities. And like I said, it's a continuous refinement, right, of internal product strategy. So generating revenue through improving your product, improving your strategy, as well as building awareness via external go-to-market, so marketing and sales. So if you haven't put together a mission statement, this is something that you can do, and this is something you can share internally, because it starts to just allow people to understand that this is something that's part of your remit and something that you want to help with. So like I said, AR can drive revenue in all of these phases. I think, if you look at product and strategy on the left, I've included some ways that it's really revenue centric. And ultimately, that's helping you better understand your customers, right? When we look at AR in the middle, our role is really to help with expanding into new geographies, whether it's funding or investor validation, establishing new partnerships on the strategy side. helping product understand their key personas that they'll be selling to, technology roadmaps, budgeting, what is the market size and share, what are the growth rates, understanding their competitors. And then when we look at marketing and sales on the right-hand side, that's really helping customers understand you. So taking that content and helping communicate that strategy, and that's through lead generation from marketing, cold emails from sales, and we'll talk about the nuances there. But what I've seen, and I think effective organizations are starting to consolidate sales and marketing so that they're, you don't want to have one doing something without the other. You don't want sales operating without marketing. So a lot of organizations are starting to put those two departments on the same metrics so that they're aligned and that they continue to partner most closely. But it is, again, just a continuous cycle as you run through, as you evolve your sales organization, that's going to impact strategy, perhaps M&A, things like that. So we'll start out, we'll also get into a little bit on the buyer journey, which is a big topic right now. I know Gartner just put out some material. There's been a lot of blogs and conversation around the buyer journey. I've tried to simplify it, and really, I think that's important just because the more complicated you make it, the harder it is to measure, and you always want to be able to measure things and just be able to understand, are you hitting these buckets? So, you think about the jobs to be done by your buyers, and, it starts with that awareness, education, letting them know that you're in the market. You want to just, and then going through that decision and selection. So the ways that you can kind of start out, right, is through that awareness, education, and planning component. And if you're building your ideal customer profile, that's likely not going to be a single individual. It's going to be an organization. So we're thinking about how we can leverage this type of content for different parts of the organization, whether it's a bottom-up approach or top-down. Again, that may be, specific to your solution or your organization where you prefer to start. But it's really that quick hitting, easily digestible content that helps them know that you offer these solutions. It's things like that aren't, and I'll talk about do's and don'ts later as well, but preferably it's content that doesn't require a form or something that's going to stop them from being able to consume their content, your content right away. So it's blogs, social assets, infographics that you're sharing. Sometimes it can be webinars, but videos are really, really helpful at this stage. And it's really helping them move to that next stage so that you can help answer, is the technology at the right maturity for our consideration? Like, should we be thinking about this type of technology and why? Why should I be thinking about this? And if you're in marketing and you've read the book or listened to the audiobook on crossing the chasm, I think that's where that you start to think about crossing the chasm, right? You may have some clients that are in that more innovative set, and you're trying to just broaden the market, and really that's where analyst content can really help, is in validating that this is a mature technology that can help provide tangible benefits. So then, phase 2, you're focusing on digital maturity, and these are longer format materials. What I found really successful was organizations using benchmarking tools, right? So that's taking survey data from analyst firms or doing your own surveys, but if you can supplement it with the analyst content, obviously that's objective third-party validation, and helping them understand where they fit within that digital maturity so that they can stay ahead of competitors. But white papers, I think your Magic Quadrant would fit in here as well, because that's just, this is a real technology and you're a player in it. If there's assessments or other reports, at 451, there were impact reports and things like that, or longer format reports that focus just on, where you are in your life cycle. And then last, they've got this short list. They're making the decision and selecting a vendor. This is where your longer format content, peer insight can be hugely valuable. But this is like business cases, ROI, et cetera. So I think when you're thinking about a high level content, applying it to jobs to be done in your buyer journey, just kind of making sure that your content fits into these, different buckets so that you can have different tools in your toolkit at various stages is helpful. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see just an example of something like that at 451, this is a 451 example, but it could be this could apply to any analyst firm that's out there. I'm agnostic now, so I'm not endorsing any particular firm. But starting with like a custom video in Q1, putting together a cohesive campaign around a particular topic that you really want to hit on. IDC did really great 2-minute videos where analysts would speak to a particular technology. It was really well produced. And they also did lead generation activities. And what I really thought was interesting if you look at different analyst firms or different vendors that are out there that offer this type of technology, again, you want to be able to measure a lot of these things. And there are ways to measure your campaigns and driving traffic to things that don't need forms, right? So there's ways that you can just track, source of accessing a blog or a video or a page or a landing page, so that you can measure it. It's super important to be able to measure KPIs around, not only forms and leads and marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, but even just generating traffic and awareness. That's a big part of what AR can help accomplish here. And then we just go through like each one, like I said, a little bit more detail along that buyer journey. So as we started to get into more of like the lead generation concept and kind of working with sales around things like cold emails, I think something that I've always ascribed to is, just selling to others the way that I want to be sold, right? And I call that my golden rule of sales. What makes me open an email? And that's, essentially what the jobs to be done are for your buyer. And it doesn't have to be specific to, super granular, super technical. I think anyone that's in IT, in AR, in marketing, whatever they're doing, everyone is always constantly trying to learn something new. I think those are your best buyers. So that's what, from an analyst concept, that's our bread and butter, right? We're like ahead of the game. We're helping them stay on top of trends. We're helping them understand where the market's headed. So we can constantly be feeding our buyers and our prospects with new concepts that they can learn. And I think when you're building awareness, that's really a super important just concept to keep in the back of your mind. How is what you're putting out there helping them learn something? And then, when we start to look at individual hooks, it's solving problems, saving times, avoiding mistake. How can they make more money, generate revenue? And again, this is one that I think is, really important, is making them look good, right? If we can provide them with content that they can then provide to their boss that, helps validate a project that they've been trying to get funded, these are things that just help them do their job. And, I always like to include, one thing that you can do, hopefully not right now, but after the webinar. But if it's something that you haven't done in the past, think about within your own organization. I'm sure if you work for a software company, you have developers, you have a CIO, you have a CTO, you have a CMO. Send them an email and ask them, like, how many cold emails do you get a day? What was the last one that you opened? Why did you open it? What was included in it? Did you take any additional action from it? I think leveraging your own internal people can be a more unbiased, honest source of feedback on content that you're trying to put together. So if there's one thing that you can do after this webinar is send your head of engineering an email and say, hey, I'm thinking about a cold email campaign, would love to get your feedback. So again, just as Duncan said, we're thinking about, how can you start a more robust AR sales partnership if you don't have one in place? If you've already got one, maybe you'll find one or two interesting points here that will be helpful. I think it starts with building credibility and awareness. As I said, the mission statement can really help you generate awareness. But I think within sales, credibility is huge. All it takes is one sales rep to say, I sent my prospect a magic quadrant and they went with a competitor, and now I don't trust AR anymore because that content made me lose a deal. I think you need to be in front of them all the time, providing them with relevant content, whether it's through a newsletter. I've seen some really great examples on LinkedIn and from prospects and just subscribing to AR newsletters from different vendors that I worked with on win reports. So just, again, tracking KPIs and opportunities that you can source back to analyst relations and analyst impact is something that you definitely want to start spreading internally. And then strategy days and training. I was on a webinar with, just as an example, Everest Group the other day, and I have on the next slide kind of talk about how different firms vary in terms of their flexibility. It was interesting to me to hear Everest say, they have an analyst relations team there that's, I think, kind of up and coming and really good. And as part of their inquiry service, you can have your sales management team, your sales team, get on the phone with an analyst, and they'll walk you through some of these trends that I outlined here on the right-hand side or, on the bottom, that you want to help the sales team understand. And I thought that was really interesting. And that's just getting them, on the phone with somebody that specializes in their area and is focused on helping them do better, and that helps you get more value from your subscription. And it was something that they really hammered home on that webinar. So again, these are just, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but I think, sales is really interested in, why are people buying? When do budgets fall? What are particular industry verticals that should be in my ideal customer profile? And you can compare these with your own customer data and really start to, help them forecast, help sales management forecast. You can help them develop prospect lists and ideal customer profiles, again, at an organizational level. And there are, at 451, there was a whole quarter on organizational dynamics on who has seats at the buying table. I know IDC does that as well. I'm sure you can find a lot of other analyst firms that produce content around, just how customers buy. And I think that that's something that you can feed back to your sales team and marketing as well as they start to combine forces and understand, not only the buyer, but also what's happening in the market, because no one stays on top of competitive dynamics in a rapidly evolving markets like cybersecurity, even customer experience, like analyst firms. So again, just here we go with just digging a little bit deeper, digging into that sales mindset. Where are they thinking? How can you help? I think we'll dig into more detail on sales tactics, which will be where that kind of cold email starts to fall. You can do everything from helping your sales team better understand the technology that they're selling to make them a more relevant voice and trusted advisor in the market. But like I said, you can start on the left-hand side as their sales planning. What are impacts? What are growth rates? Where is your particular product strong and weak based on analysts? And then reviewing maybe you lost, understanding where you lost a deal, or, maybe there's M&A, and what does that mean for the market? So I think, it's our job as analyst relations professionals to translate that analyst content into something that is relevant for the organization, and that's how you can add value and maximize, your revenue potential. So there's going to be a lot of content here. This is kind of your steps to building analyst content, but also just, any type of content when you're engaging with sales. And it's really, again, this is something that could be debated and probably have its own webinar. But, it just starts with building the strategy. So it's a build Duncan, if you want to just start out with the bottom there. And again, there's a lot of text here, but I think, again, it's important to speak with your internal team to understand, what are the stakeholders, what are they going to value the most in the year ahead as you're putting together analyst relations plan. It could be we're looking to enter new geographies, so we really want to understand what's going on in Asia Pacific, and there's specific research that we can then, and analysts that we can then point them towards. IDC, I think, was a very underutilized resource, was that they have vertical specific analyst teams in addition to their technology centric analysts. So, maybe you're offering a cybersecurity solution, but it's for the financial services vertical. IDC had financial services analysts that were specifically working with banks that, may have a different view, a more holistic view on that particular industry vertical. So that'll just help you define your value proposition, understand key pain points. And these are all things that you can then feed into your content, because you're going to want, analysts produce a ton of content, right? So you're going to gather all that market input, and you can expand this one, Duncan. And just on that strategy point, again, it's important, that bottom bullet, just what are the metrics that are going to be used for your stakeholders, marketing, sales, and AR, product and strategy should all be aligned on metrics and KPIs. And again, that's a topic that you could have a whole webinar on. So, this is pretty straightforward, right? Analysts produce a lot of content. You want to work with them, work with your sales rep. A lot of analyst firms have customer experience or customer success teams that can help point you in their direction of content, so you don't have to look for it all yourself. Set up alerts, can't emphasize that enough. But there's a lot of data that's out there. So make sure that you're speaking with your analysts. These are great topics for inquiry, to kind of understand, where the relevant data is. And if you have a data analyst, they're going to want to help you maximize the value of your subscription because they want you to renew, and they want you to use the data. And then you're going to create that content. So you're going to create that campaign that I talked about earlier that aligns with your buyer journey. It should be thematically linked, and I'll in the email examples that I provide a little bit later on, I'll kind of hone in on that as a best practice. And this is, again, going to help your clients learn things, but help them at each stage of the journey. And it'll help with, you should be thinking about within the organization itself, whether it's C-level content or more kind of practitioner level content. And then you're going to take that content and you're going to enable the sales team, right? And this is where, as Duncan was saying, sometimes, I have it in my do's and don'ts as well. You can't just, I've worked as a sales rep, I've carried my own bag. I worked as an overlay for sales. I worked as a product manager. If you hand sales content without it being wrapped up in a nice, pretty bow that they can then take and just give to their clients, it's going to just sit there, probably in their email box. So I would really work with your marketing team to think about how you can, again, whether it's trainings or strategy days or just you constantly want to be in the face of sales. You can't, and if you told them something a week ago, you're going to want to tell them this week as well, because they've already moved on to something new. But something that I also saw that was really helpful was, as Duncan was saying, with Tech Target, right? So you've got ESG Tech Target, right? That can help provide you with leads. IDC, as part of Foundry, offered a lead generation service that would provide MQLs.
Sean, I feel like I should be on the next slide. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, and then I think 451 was able to guarantee leads as well. So leverage those services if you have the budget. If not, we definitely work with marketing, but you definitely want to be as prescriptive as possible with sales. So we talked about the campaign, right, where we're kind of setting our, as if you've been on any analyst webinar talking about big rocks, right, or there's the assessments, there's your, things that you're investing a lot of money in. There's reports and reprints that you've worked really hard on getting included in, and that you're paying a lot of money for. But cold emails to me help fill in the gaps, right? So they're analogous to a cold call back when people used to make phone calls. So I don't want to confuse it with bulk emailing, where you're using a marketing automation tool to send out, hey, we were leaders or challengers or niche or visionary in this, or we were included in a Forrester Wave, or here's a report that we were included in by Futurum. So that's definitely good. You need all that stuff, but I think as you start to work more closely with sales, you're going to find that there's a whole team of SDRs that are out there hungry for content, right? They're looking for ways that they can create personalized content to book meetings for their sales reps. And sales reps are looking for content that is data driven, so that they can help their prospects learn things, and that makes them more value added, so that it's not just like, hey, just checking back in. Nobody wants to get a check back in email. And I know there's probably, we could argue back and forth on whether or not unsubscribes are a good thing, but I always if I feel like somebody's a good prospect and they unsubscribe to my emails, I kind of take that personally, because I feel like I haven't done my job as a sales rep or a marketer in providing them with valuable enough content that they want to keep getting it. So, you could say that strips them out of, your prospect list, but again, you could go either way, and I'd love to hear some questions or comments later on. Analyst firms do produce a ton of data that's effective, and part of the challenge is identifying the right type of content to include. But again, leverage your customer success teams. We'll have a call to action later. Duncan and I are happy to have conversations about this topic with you on a one-on-one basis. But I'm sure people are curious about the graphic at the bottom there. There's less flexible firms, and I think Gartner obviously is well known for that. Forrester is a little bit more lenient, and then you get into there's no science to this spectrum. So if you're on this list and you don't agree with it, please don't take it personally. It's really the general concept here is that a lot of people are going to subscribe to Gartner and Forrester, IDC. Those are the big three. But there's a ton of value in the research and the data that a lot of other analyst firms are producing, because the way that they're going to differentiate, and the way that 451 differentiated, was that they want you to use their content. They're going to be a lot less stringent about using a chart or a graph here and there for cold email like this. Even at IDC, you could, it wasn't as well known, but I would, again, check with your sales rep or customer success rep to make sure that this is still accurate. But, one or two paragraphs in a chart, they were very cool with that. So, if you're looking if you don't want to pay full price for reprints, or even if you bought kind of holistic reprints throughout the year. Like if you bought reprints at 451, they produced vendor agnostic spotlight reports that talked about individual technologies and why they were important. And they would let you use that just as part of your subscription because that's a differentiator from a Gartner, right? So it's something to explore as you're thinking about your budget. And I do want to highlight, a new firm that I've come across here that I found has really great data as well. They don't, again, I'm not being paid, but ETR, Enterprise Technology Research, would recommend you check these guys out. They're primarily focused on surveys and interviews with technology practitioners, and I find it like to me that's gold in this industry, and it's something that when you're thinking about what are peers doing, where is mature, what's happening in terms of maturity and getting that unvarnished feedback, a lot of that is from survey research and even more importantly, customer interviews.
And sure, just to chip in with a couple of thoughts here. I think if I was drawing this diagram again, I would kind of put a bit of space in the middle. I would put Gartner and Forrester a little bit more over that side. I think they are less flexible, but I think they're also becoming less flexible, Forrester in particular at the moment. And then when I think of almost all of the other firms, they're all becoming more flexible. And, Enterprise Strategy Group they are the analysts who love the vendors. They're never going to give a vendor a hard time. But I think now that Canalys and Omdia are moving towards that tech target model, I think we can expect other groups in the Informa families, definitely the IDC brands, Foundry and IDC with their partnership. They're all moving that way. And of course the kind of organic credibility of these brands, their brand equity varies a lot. But if a vendor is using these firms in their own marketing, it doesn't really matter so much. I mean, you are pushing that content out to your buyers. So the difference in brand equity matters a little bit less when you are basically paying this content to be in front of your users rather than relying on its organic reach.
Right. So as I alluded to earlier, here's a few, just straightforward do's and don'ts that just in terms of my experience over the years, just seemed to be important when I was working with clients and helping them maximize value in these types of activities. You obviously want to track everything that you're doing as KPIs, and if you want to be able to point to specific deals that have closed because of analyst generated content. So you definitely want to make sure that you're not just lobbing it out there and hoping something sticks and not measuring it. I think that's, and it's just, I can't stress how important that is. As I said, you want to link to available content or blog posts as part of a cohesive campaign. I think there's nothing more frustrating than when people are interested in some content and they go to a link, and before they can even get any type of value from it, they're asked for their email address. I think you want to be able to validate that this is interesting content and give them a chance to review it prior to them having to give up something. So it's, that quid pro quo. They're going to click on your link, they're going to go to your site, they're going to find something value, and then in exchange, they're going to give you your email address, which is really important, to them, because it means they're probably going to get reached out to by a sales rep 3, 4, 5 times. So just keep that in the back of your mind as well. Is that part of that golden rule? Ask analysts about survey content crosstabs for your ideal customer profile. When these analyst firms are doing surveys, they're asking questions like, what's your industry? What's your role? Where is your company headquartered? And so a lot of the times behind that kind of top level data, they can provide you with very specific data cuts. And again, for an example, at 451, that was included as part of the subscription. At IDC, there was a nominal fee. It was pretty small to do something like that. It's just like a couple of hours work. To be able to get a comparison between, if you're you're selling to manufacturing firms like Duncan's working at, and you're, talking about digital twins, and you want to talk about oil and gas versus energy, or energy and oil and gas is one big thing versus manufacturing versus, everybody, the whole sample. You can then start to point out some of those interesting nuances, and the more that you personalize that, the more interesting it is to your prospect, the more likely they are to click on that content. And, again, always ask your reps before you do anything, make sure that it flies with what they're doing. But I think if you do ask, they'll be happy to help. They're there, once you're a client, they want to make sure that you renew. So anything they can do to help you get more value is something that they're going to work with you on. They're not going to tell you, most likely, they're not going to tell you flat out no. There'll be a way that they can work with you on it. Again, don't expect your sales team to read your newsletter or use a research login on their own. Don't blast out automated emails to everyone with the same message, and don't link directly to form-gated content or something that requires a subscription, because that's just going to create frustration with your prospects, and they're not getting any value from that. Just being conscious of the time. So I'll go through these. These are a few examples, and as Duncan said, we'll have this recorded and everything. These are a few examples of some cold emails that I put together pretty quickly. I mean, I think that there's, these are just using recent blog posts, because I unfortunately don't have a research subscription anymore. But what the idea here is, in these examples, if you look on the left-hand side, it's just, where it came from, who's the target, what's the sector we're talking about, who's it coming from. There's a chart example right there. The idea here is, like, your subject should be one of those hooks that we talked about with those jobs to be done, those top level, learn something, solve a problem. This is something that, hopefully will catch their attention in a sea of cold emails. This is something you're going to want to test. Back to that silver bullet. You may have some examples. There's definitely firms out there that specialize in this. But we can help you with it as well. And that's in the blue. That's your subject, your hook. Yellow is your data, right? So again, a lot of what I like to do is data driven. It's helping companies learn. It's helping them cross that chasm. It's helping them understand why this email is in their inbox and why they should think about what's in green, which is your hook, which is your kind of next step, your call to action. So here, we're talking about a technology, cloud native, containers, etc. We're helping them connect the dots to what are the goals that companies like them may have, and that's using cloud native. Why is the technology that I'm trying to sell you important? Because it creates more centralized visibility and management of IT resources. And that's the top goal for most organizations. So if you want to understand best practices in improving visibility and management, here's a quick 2-minute video with an analyst talking about best practices, right? So it's a very 1, 2, 3 step, right? Your hook, your data, your kind of job to be done, and then your call to action next step that leverages why I talked about campaigns and creating that content, because you want to be able to repurpose it in these cold emails as the next step. And then if you go to the next one, Duncan, well, it's very similar. Now we're getting a little bit more into the line of business. We're selling it to marketing. We're talking about marketing workloads, some data from IDC. If you've worked with IDC, you know that they produce a ton of data, probably more than any analyst firm that's out there. So when you're, as Duncan said, if you're kind of thinking about what's my analyst mix, if I'm thinking about data, if I'm thinking about where technology is headed, it's 451. If I'm thinking about data and trends over time, it's IDC. And here's talking about marketing, increased marketing productivity by more than 40% from a CMO or in marketing ops. That's something that's going to catch my attention. Gen AI is obviously a topic everyone's talking about. IDC in particular, if you were just at directions, It was probably the #1 topic talked about at Directions. Just here is your across the chasm. There are in building that awareness and why this is important. Over the next 5 years, we're an analytics and reporting vendor. It's going to go 15% of organizations are going to be using Gen AI for analytics and reporting today. In 5 years, it's going to be almost half, right? So if you want to get ahead of the competition, here's a blog post with 10 practices to prepare marketing for Gen AI's disruptive impact. And then you'll find a white paper that goes deeper on the subject. So again, it's blog post, free content, white paper, deep content, hitting people at the different stages of the buying journey. And then there's the last example, which is for our, my security folks who work in probably one of the most dynamic industries and just came back from RSA, where there were probably 1 million different new announcements. Here we have Forrester just had a podcast and a blog post about top cybersecurity threats in 2024. Some really shocking data from some of their surveys. Companies that, so if you're pitching to Fortune 500, companies, at least almost 80% of companies have been breached at least once in the last year, and almost a quarter have been breached 6 to 10 times, right? So if I'm a threat detection vendor, or anything in cybersecurity these days, you want to understand what are the top threats that you need to care about in 2024. And then again, that online benchmarking tool that you've created and spent a lot of money on, this is helping your sales team get that in the hands of their prospects, and it's helping them sell and add value. So those are a few examples. Again, would love to hear any questions or comments you have. Duncan, if you want to just go through the last slide, and then I think in terms of time, probably questions.
Absolutely. So just to throw in a little bit of an advert, one of the things that Shawn and I have been working on is an online workshop where we step through those first 4 blocks that were in that staircase diagram that Shawn showed earlier on. But then we go to drill down into 2 activities more deeply in order to help people to start to operationalize this. So this is the flow through the 6 blocks of the workshop process. We're talking about crafting that kind of mission statement, understanding how you can start to activate the partnership with analyst relations by learning how to extract analyst insight and deliver it to sales in the way that Shawn has spoken about, making it easy for them to digest, thinking more about making the thought leadership connection, so thinking more about those jobs to be done, looking to see where there's analyst content that exists or doesn't exist and needs to be created in order to produce content that aligns with those jobs to be done. That's the stuff that your customers will most want to read. Taking that through to sales enablement, firstly by feeding intelligence through from that first block, and then secondly by looking at that content that we're starting to generate through the program, which will enable those salespeople to be able to personalize their communications more effectively with salespeople. Fifthly, customer profilings. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and often analyst relations programs and participants are not heavily involved in that crafting of the ideal customer persona, translating that into the kind of content that is needed, translating that into the kinds of conversations that are needed with analysts in order to inspire analysts to pay more attention to the jobs to be done, where you and your clients are short on powerful analyst content. And then finally, tactical content use. As Shawn has said, what we're really trying to communicate is that organizations that are doing one-to-many communication have got some success, but the more that we're able to craft and personalize this and generate the kinds of outcomes that the business is looking for, the more successful these programs will be. What I'm going to do now is kind of move through to questions and answers. There's more content that I would have drilled into if we had more time. Maybe that'll be another webinar. But I'm just going to pause now and see if there are any questions, comments, pieces of feedback. I'll also go out of the presentation view so that I can see those a little bit more clearly. So We have some great questions. Shawn, just to start off, how do you balance the need for personalization with the risk of appearing intrusive or overly familiar? I mean, there are a couple of questions here, but I'm gonna take the first question out of this list of questions, and just put that one to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's an expectation these days that there's a lot of information about people that is out there. I think people are looking to build, a lot of people are looking to build their LinkedIn brands. And so they're putting their content out there and they're expecting salespeople to use it. So I think, in this day and age, privacy is kind of a rare commodity. A lot of people's professional lives are out there, and I think it comes down to adding that value, right? So if you're adding value in the outreach that you're doing and it is more personalized, they may tell you to leave them alone, but at least you've put your best foot forward and you feel like, they've um, that you've done your due diligence, you've personalized it for them. And not every and that's where it may be that not everyone is a great prospect, right? Some people are not like that, where they're not putting themselves out there. And they may be offended that you've, taken a stab at something and you may get it wrong. But again, it's part of that iteration process. And it's where you may, end up just saying, okay, they're not a buyer. They're not interested in my outreach. Who else within the organization is interested in learning something new? Then maybe that mindset kind of trumps where they're at.
Another question is how important is timing in the context of sending campaigns? And I guess timing has really got two attributes. I mean, like obviously best time in the day, but also the more that we're able to understand where the buyer is in the buyer journey, then the more we're able to make sure that we've got content objects that relate to the key stages in the buyer journey and are relevant to the buyer's problems rather than being self-serving.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would, again, I would think about looking at the survey data that your analysts are producing. They're going to have, one of the things that 451 was really good at was like, where is this particular technology at in terms of adoption for, the overall sample? But then, like I said, you can start to drill down and get fairly granular. Who has this technology in use today? Who has it, who's has it in POC? Who's going to be implementing it over the next year? And then what was, the most important point was that middle part, like who's considering this technology. And then that's something that you can then include in your outreach, right? It's like, hey, a lot of your peers are in a POC phase with our technology. Where are you at in your buying journey? And then you start to, you've added value by helping them understand that the market, but you're also asking a question to help hopefully start a dialogue around that. And then, I think there's, again, a lot of analyst firms get very creative when it comes to like helping you understand the value. So there was some data that I saw around like digital twins, and it was like where that fell in terms of overall priorities among CIOs. When they're thinking about their IoT technology roadmaps, but then they cross that with what projects provide the most value. So if you see like it's a technology that has low adoption, but high value among the people that have adopted it, that's something you want to broadcast from the mountaintops, right?
Totally.
So I think, and they may understand where you're at in terms of adoption, or they may be in a different part of their journey. But again, it's helping them understand that their market, and that even if they're somewhere different, if they start a dialogue with you, you can help them.
Yeah. One last question. I know some people are going to have to drop off, but I just think this last comment is interesting. Someone commented that they noticed that education pieces are better perceived than reports focusing on the company. And I think this touches on a few things that you've spoken about earlier on. One is content that addresses itself to the buyer's jobs to be done. And then the other is this educational period earlier on, where, I'm not wondering what is the best ice cream maker. I'm wondering, do I need an ice cream maker? Yeah. So that there's a certain level of specificity that changes as the buyer goes through the journey.
So sorry, what was the question?
Well, the question is, do you agree? Yeah, do you agree? Educational pieces get better perceived than reports focusing on the company, which could be self-serving.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think, to me, like and as I put in the buyer journey, I think you want to be as company agnostic upfront as possible. I think it's more of that, like, okay, I've decided that this is something that important. Why should I go with XYZ vendor? And now you have something in your toolkit that you can pull out that says, here's why you should go with this. Here's why you should consider us as, as part of your shortlist. And then, again, you have a case study or, whether it's ROI or whatever, that kind of helps drive home the point, like, okay, you built your shortlist. Here's why we should be your selection, because, here's our best foot forward from an objective third party perspective.
Amazing. Shawn, I'm going to draw it to a close today, and I want to thank most of our participants for holding on past the top of the hour. I really hugely appreciate that. I think this is a really interesting topic because lots of people talk about the challenges of sales enablement programs that are already running, but I think for many AR programs, they're not really there. The recording and the webinar slides will go out to participants who've registered and not registered. And if you're interested in speaking with Shawn and I about this workshop process, then please let us know. We'll probably send you an email and invite you to have a follow-up call with us in order to find out more about it. Shawn, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with participants here.
Thanks, Duncan.
Thank you. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.